Hello again, and welcome to another edition of Dr. Mack's Organizational Behavior Hack. It's nice to have you here, and I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to discuss two basic theoretical approaches to organizational behavior. As we do so, keep in mind that there are many theories, but today we're going to cover the predominant ones that are frequently discussed in the literature. Here we go. The goals for this edition include the following. First, understand the importance of theory in our lives. Second, present two predominant schools of thought in organizational behavior theory. And third, discuss notable scholars who have written on these subjects along with the arguments they're making. And finally, I'm going to provide a practical example of these two theories in action. Some people don't like theory, and they think that it's not applicable to them. I personally find theory very interesting, and I definitely believe it's relevant. If you think about it, our lives are guided by theory. We enroll in school based on the belief that we will become educated and find a better career. We get out of bed each morning and go to work because we assume we will get paid and have a better quality of life. And we might volunteer for an organization because we think we might be able to make a difference in our communities. In addition to these more routine theories, there are unique theoretical perspectives about organizations. According to Heaveman and Wetz, organizations are the fundamental building blocks of modern society. That is to say, organizations have a profound impact on our ability to sustain our lives. They determine how we manage our societies politically, and they influence the fulfillment we get from various activities. But organizing our efforts to accomplish goals has been witnessed throughout history. Primitive societies organized themselves into hunters and gatherers in order to have enough food to live. There was a belief that certain people were better at killing animals, while others were better at planting and cultivating crops. Another example is provided in the book Organizational Behavior in Public Management. The authors note that in Exodus, Jethro, the father-in-law, told Moses that he was going to waste away trying to solve all of the problems among the Israelites. He recommended that there should be rulers of 100s, 50s, and 10s, so that Moses could concentrate on major priorities versus small issues. Rules were also prescribed to shape behavior. As people moved from rural areas to cities, businesses and new forms of government were created. These changes in turn resulted in two predominant ways to structure and run organizations. The first approach is known as the classical school. It gives priority to bureaucratic arrangements and standard rules of operations. The second perspective is known as the humanistic school. It dives into unique aspects related to the humans, their psychology, social relations, and cultural attitudes and practices. Let's look closer at each one. Classical organizational behavior theory is based on several key assumptions. First, scientific experience indicates that there's a right way to structure and operate an organization, whether that's a factory, a business, government agency, or nonprofit organization. Second, key tasks must be identified, clarified, and shared with managers and workers. Third, employees can help managers accomplish goals. Fourth, workers will want compensation for their efforts to help the organization achieve objectives. In some ways, this perspective suggests that organizations are machines. If you can engineer them correctly, they will work perfectly. In his well-known treatise, Adam Smith extolled the benefits of capitalism and suggested that this economic system can be productive and efficient. The example of a factory illustrates this effectiveness. One person can cut the wire for a pen, another person can put the head on the pen, and a final person can sharpen it. The major point he was making is that division of labor can increase productivity in dramatic ways. Frederick Winslow Taylor is a modern-day engineer who oversaw the management of factories and industrialization. In his position, he looked at the individual worker and he identified ways to help the employee become more productive. Specifically, he looked at how long it would take a worker to perform a task and what could be done to limit physical movements to make them more efficient. He asserted that if workers had the right tools and an appropriate work environment, and if they were carefully supervised, the employees would be more productive. His recommendations seemed to have merit. He was able to increase the loading of iron ore onto cars from 12.5 tons to 47 tons. In short, if the factory is set up to help workers, and if the employees receive training, counsel, and pay, their performance will naturally increase. Max Weber was a German sociologist, historian, and political economist. Instead of looking at individual workers, as Taylor did, Weber was more interested in leaders and their entire organization. He believed organizations based on hierarchy were very effective, and he believed leaders of organizations could possess power in one of three ways. First, leaders could inherit power, such as the rule of a king that is passed down from generation to generation. Second, a leader could acquire power based on charisma, for example, a powerful orator. Third, a leader could possess power through qualifications and adherence to law. In his opinion, a bureaucracy, which includes a unique mix of hierarchical structure, specialization of labor, and formal rules, would help organizations and leaders accomplish goals. Henry Fayol was an engineer and mining executive who developed the theory of business administration. He identified modern management methods to help businesses succeed. He stated that organizations perform technical, commercial, financial, security, accounting, and management activities. Planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling were key elements of effective management. We'll talk more about him as well as others in the future. Like Weber, Gulick was interested in the structure of an organization and the division of labor. But similar to Fayol, he was also known for his principles of management to help leaders administer programs and oversee workers. We'll discuss more about his ideas in a future video presentation, so I won't share more about his work at this point. Classical organizational behavior theory helps businesses and government entities to organize themselves, specify goals, divide tasks, and improve management. However, this perspective is not without its faults. Critics suggest that it's too structured and treats employees like they're a cog in a wheel. It implies that there's only one right way to manage processes and people, and it ignores the human element. Charles Goodsell, in his book The Case for Bureaucracy, said bureaucracy is often associated with incompetent, indifferent, bloated, and malevolent administrative departments in government. Perhaps for this reason, there's another theoretical viewpoint on organizational behavior. The humanistic school is a perspective that reiterates the importance of humans in organizations. According to Bowman and Dill, this school of thought is based on four assumptions. Organizations exist for the benefit of humans and not the other way around. People and organizations rely on each other. People create organizations to get things done, and organizations need workers. The last two assumptions are similar. If we can create the right relationships between people and their organizations, a lot of great things can happen. Conversely, problematic relationships can hurt workers and organizations. Mary Parker Follet was an American philanthropist and philosopher. She was also a trailblazer in management theory and organizational behavior. She noted that managers and employees can integrate efforts instead of dominating or giving in. She wanted to make sure that workers could influence how organizations operate. She said, "You cannot coordinate purpose without developing purpose. Some people want to give the workmen a share in carrying out the purpose of the plant and do not see that this involves a share in creating the purpose of the plant." In other words, this famous consultant suggested that workers should have a say in what an organization does and how they may accomplish those goals. Elton Mayo was an Australian psychologist, industrial researcher, and organizational theorist. He was asked to help the Western Electric factory become more effective and profitable. He theorized that if workers had more light, they would be more productive. The assumption was that if employees' needs are met in the factory, they will work harder for the company. Roethlisberger said the health and well-being of workers became matters of great concern. Their opinions, hopes, and fears were eagerly sought. The experimenters had completely altered the social situation of the room. Inadvertently, a change had been introduced which was far more important than the planned experimental innovations. The customary supervision in the room had been revolutionized. This was known as the Hawthorne effect, but the study indicated that opening up lines of communication and paying attention to workers' needs could provide many benefits to the company. Chester Barnard was an American business executive and public administrator. He said organizations are always in a state of dynamic equilibrium in which there is always some tension among the participants. He stressed the need for informal relationships where executives keep in mind personalities and values and focus on communication and friendships. In his view, this would facilitate cooperation and the attainment of organizational goals. Herbert Simon is a very well-known political scientist. His work concentrated a lot on decision-making. He argued that while the goal of leaders and managers is to make optimal decisions, they often have to settle for satisfactory choices due to bounded rationality. Nevertheless, he recommended that decision-making requires identifying alternatives along with their consequences. This would help leaders and managers make the best choices possible for organizations. Abraham Maslow was a very famous American psychologist. Maslow thought the key to helping organization was to understand what motivates people. He noted that we cannot just focus on physical desires and requirements. We also need to understand emotional and other needs of employees. We'll talk more later about his work on motivation and what that means for organizations. The humanistic school sheds light on many unique features of organizations, and it helps to identify other variables that influence how people behave. While this perspective helped to develop new theories about democratic organizations, the importance of management involvement, respect, decision-making, and employee needs, the recommendations are not always as concrete as those in the classical scientific management perspective. Therefore, it appears that we really need to have both theoretical frameworks to understand and manage organizations. This brings up a point by Emile Durkheim, a French sociologist. He argued that we need to understand the structure of an organization and apply management principles. At the same time, we must also comprehend and shape the informal aspects of organizations, in other words, the culture. So he was basically advocating to apply both theories of organizational behavior, if and as needed. Let me share two examples that illustrate the importance of both theoretical viewpoints. In 2015, I was hired by a new university and began to serve as dean for about 5.5 years. When I was hired, my provost noted that I would have my hands full. He was right. The college was short-handed, and since it was relatively new, it lacked organizational structure as well as standards and procedures in terms of how we were to operate. We had negative growth in enrollment as a result. I therefore hired good employees and gave them assignments of units and functions to oversee. We created operating procedures, and fortunately, this turned the organization around. We went from having the lowest percentage of growth to the highest at the university in about 4 years. One of the departments in my college was aviation. This unit was struggling in many ways. It had 10 department chairs over the prior decade, and there was a lot of distrust within the department and with the college and university. Enrollment and revenue were declining, and there was fear that the organization was about ready to go belly up. As I listened to the situation, I realized that a formal, mechanistic approach would not work. I could not simply say, do your job. That would have backfired. So I decided to get to know the employees, and I asked them to help me figure out what was wrong and what could be done differently. I believe I gained the trust of most of the employees over time in spite of the many challenges that we faced. We implemented several new ideas that were shared, particularly regarding how we could retain our flight instructors. More students enrolled, and we were able to get them through the program more efficiently. This increased our revenue, and we were able to purchase over 20 new aircraft and several simulators. This was a miracle in my mind, and it only occurs because culture became the top priority. Anyway, the main point I want to stress is that these theories clearly have practical application, but of course it's somewhat contextual. Well, I hope the video was useful. If so, please give a like. Best regards and best wishes.